Hello, everyone. Heather here. It's been a minute. Um, do any of you have that friend in your life that tells you the things that you don't really want to hear, but you know you need to hear? This message is going to be a little bit about that, a little bit like that. So buckle up. I am noticing a pattern in probably the last couple of weeks. And I'm noticing it casually, but I'm also noticing it in my client circle. And it's this uprising or this unearthing of very deep feelings that are typically viewed as uncomfortable, unwelcome, unwanted, right? We're talking severe anger responses, extreme sadness, very emotional outbursts, reactions, all of this. And I'm here to say that we have to feel these things. We have to go through these things. We have to allow these emotions to be what they are. Because if we don't, then they trap themselves inside our bodies. And that's what ultimately creates disharmony and dis-ease and illness and so on. When we don't give ourselves permission to feel what we're feeling, it's typically because we've been conditioned to not behave a certain way, right? Don't talk about your feelings, keep your feelings to yourself. Don't react certain ways, keep things under wraps and hidden, right? This is not our truth. It's not our innate nature. We're allowed to feel whatever we feel, but we've been so conditioned to not sit with these things and work with these things and see them as a natural part of being human, that we stay in this space of rejecting what we're feeling. And when we stay in that place of rejecting what we're feeling, we are inherently rejecting an element of ourselves that needs some type of healing. It needs some type of processing. It needs some type of airtime so that we can work with it and be with it. Last week, it was a client who had been having some really deep, angry responses to things coming up. We can blame it on the moon. We can blame it on the moon cycle. We can blame it on eating too many carbs that day, whatever we want to come up with. But the root cause of it is that there's a lesson somewhere in that response. When we dig a little deeper behind anger, we typically will find that it is having to do with some sort of a threat. So we're not talking, lions chasing us through the wilderness type of a threat, but the body perceives the energy because the body doesn't really know the difference, right? You can read the science on stuff like that. I'm not here for that. I'm here for the energy portion of it. A perceived threat creates a reaction. That reaction has our body react a certain way with chemicals, right? With hormones, with all the things that go on in this magnificent skin suit that we're in. And when that happens, well, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, we're kind of left holding the bag, right? Like, okay, well, what do I do with this now? So when the anger comes up, what's behind the anger? If we say that it's a threat, okay, it's a threat to what? Is it a real threat to my safety? Probably not, possibly, but I want to say that that's typically the more rare of the responses or the things that's going on behind the scenes that's causing us to have the angry outburst. It is more often a threat to a personal boundary that we've set, an expectation that we have perceived as being something that maybe we're entitled to. It could be a reaction to something that we have perhaps not clearly articulated to somebody else, and maybe we expected them to just know, and now they're doing something and we're getting angry about it, but we haven't communicated what we've needed. So it's a threat against some sort of internal decision we've made or we've set out or we've come up with in our heads. And now maybe our time is being threatened, or our schedule is being put into an upheaval, or there's something going on that's taking something away from us. So usually a threat is something is being taken away, right? So think emotionally, think spiritually, think time, capacity, an object, that sort of thing. So it's not always materialistic. In this way I'm talking about it, it's more of an emotional taking away of. In the last couple of days, it's been this immense sadness that's come up with a lot of people. And so the sadness is quite often related to change. We are approaching the new moon. We are approaching, in the Northern Hemisphere, we are approaching the spring equinox. We are releasing winter. Most people do not do what winter wants us to do. Winter wants us to spend time internally in a hibernation place with ourselves, learning about ourselves, letting things come up, letting things come out, looking at things, becoming aware of things that are going on in our lives. Winter wants us to be within and to kind of close out everything else that might be going on, because all of this is distraction. Everything that's outside of us that we pay any attention to, I don't care if it's somebody that you're in a relationship with, if it is a partner, if it is a child, if it is a work situation, if it is driving to the coffee shop, if it is going and making a purchase, you get the point. These are all external things that we have in our lives, or in some cases we don't, but again, you get the point I'm trying to make. When we just constantly go and do, or constantly engage with, we're not giving ourselves time. So back to my concept of the me first concept, right, that I'm constantly talking about. Winter is the most important season for that. And so now we're at the end of winter, and all of this sadness is coming up because we didn't necessarily all do the work we were supposed to be doing during that particular season. Now, the other thing I want to add with this, of course, is that our bodies don't necessarily always align with the actual season that we're going in, depending on where we live. But again, I'm in the Northern Hemisphere, so we're just going to keep it simple for the time being. We can go through all of the seasons in the course of a couple of months, energetically, and through our own emotions and processing and whatever is happening. This is the work, right? This is what we do. So a lot of people didn't take the time to do what they were supposed to do. Myself included, if you've been paying attention to some of my written pieces that are online. And so in ignoring what I knew I was supposed to be doing for myself through the winter season, I became very disconnected, very ill, and not fully in alignment with what I want to do, with who I want to be around, with the work that I'm putting out in the world. And I feel like I lost this aspect of myself and wasted a whole lot of time on a bunch of stuff that I probably shouldn't have been doing anyway because it was a distraction. So the sadness that's coming up for me currently is that I did not listen to myself. Yes, that's right. The intuitive of many, 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 many years didn't listen to herself, but this is what we do. We get into our humanness and we forget. And we allow certain things to just keep continuing and perpetuating and so on. And so in the case of my client who has had the sadness come up in the last couple of days, the sadness for them is this huge release that they're doing. And they don't realize how big of a release they're having with these particular dynamics and situations in their life. And so this is something we're working on together in our work together this particular week. And so when we allow ourselves to be sad, when we cry, when we allow this sadness to have airtime, as I like to call it, and that just really means allowing yourself to be sad, right? Allowing the emotion to just be what it is, being okay with it. We tend to learn something more quickly than if we just stuff it aside, pretend it's not happening, and carry on with our day. So back to winter for a second. Because we are releasing the tail end of the season, right? It's the end. It literally is the end. We have a week to go. As we are approaching the new energy, which is going to be new season, new moon as well, because let's have both on the same day or very close to it. There's this anticipation energy that's kind of rising up. So you might also start to feel a little bit anxious this week. Like, why do I feel so anxious this week? What's going on? There's nothing going on. There's nothing wrong. That's energy. You're feeling it. Okay. So what is the whole point of me coming on and talking to you about this today after several months of absence from doing videos? I want you to understand that you are the only person. You are the only person who can do the work with your emotions and the processing of your emotions. You have to have ownership over this stuff. You have to have self-accountability over this stuff. Sitting back and wondering why all these things are happening and why you're constantly feeling upset or why the anger is bubbling up, it's not very helpful if you won't allow yourself to sit with it for a minute and see why it's there in the first place. So what I see happening with so many people is they get stuck in this, almost in a way of spiritually bypassing their feelings, and they'll start to throw a bunch of affirmations on top of it. Or they'll start to say, oh, I just need to think more positively. Or, oh, I just have to, da, da, da. Many of you know that I'm not a big fan of shoulds. But what I will say is that you should stop shoulding on yourself. Because what you're doing is you're just kind of playing make-believe with stuff that isn't really helpful. And this is why there are so many elements of the self-help industry and the new age concepts, etc., that are really not helpful. And that's why I call it pseudo self-help sometimes, or, pseudo affirmative, because it's not helping the situation. It's throwing a blanket on top of it, and someone comes along and rips the blanket off because you haven't actually done the work. You haven't created the boundary. You haven't sat with the feeling and decided, you know what, this particular situation is no longer good enough for me, or whatever it is that's causing you to have the reaction or the emotion that you're having. So I want you to understand that growth can't happen without some level of self-accountability and some level of ownership and some level of understanding that if what you've been doing hasn't been working, you probably need to make a change. Everybody loves change. I know you do. This is sarcasm. Stay for the jokes. When we are in that place of being dissatisfied or disconnected or feeling like maybe we've disassociated even from life or disassociated from ourselves, or we're just kind of, wandering aimlessly through. It's like, oh, everything will be fine in a few weeks because the sun will be shining and it'll be spring and the flowers are going to come up and the snow's going to melt and da 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 da. Wherever you go, you bring yourself with you. And if you haven't worked on yourself is going to show up somewhere else again. And all the shadows and all the things you don't like and all the things that are bothering you aren't just going to magically, mysteriously go away. So that's my little speech for you today. That's my little honoring of the feelings pep talk today. And when you are ready to work on this stuff, you'll know. And for the people who aren't ready to work on this stuff, know that that's okay too. Because we are all here on a different path. We are all here on a different journey. And the only business that matters is our own. It's not up to us to tell somebody else they need to change. It's not up to us to say that somebody else needs to fix X, Y, Z. It's what I like to call none of our spiritual business. We need to take care of our own selves. And as we start to take care of ourselves, and as we start to grow, and as we start to welcome change and welcome feelings and allow things to be what they are, we'll notice that the external stuff will start to shift as well. We'll outgrow things, we'll outgrow people, we'll outgrow situations, spaces, in the environments, all of it. Everything starts to change. So if you can welcome the endings, then you'll be able to receive the beginnings. And so let this week be your week of endings. Let this week be your week of releasing, your week of change. So that next week, when spring comes, you have some space in your life to receive the things you want to receive. All the things you're trying to call in, they need space. They need space to be. They need space to grow. They need space to land when they show up. If you're still doing this with all your stuff, metaphorically and physically, energetically as well, well, where's the new stuff going to come in? It's just like a garden. You have to till the soil. You have to dig things up. You have to remove the stuff that doesn't need to be there anymore, that's not healthy and nourishing. So that when the new stuff comes in, we can plant the new stuff and we can nourish and nurture the new things. But all the old stuff needs to be released first. All right, my friends, that is all out of me today. Here's to a healthy release of winter and a gentle, ease-filled welcoming of spring. Honor your feelings. You have permission to honor your feelings.